Hi, welcome to part 2 of my review featuring the Maze of Mezeria. If you haven't seen part 1, please check out the link in the description below. So we will continue where we left off as the player characters are moving through the maze itself. They may get to the court of Mezeria. Ancient nobility may still hold sway even when all nobility is lost. Tread carefully to the end, for dangers await around every corner, whether it breathes or whirls. This is one of the most dangerous zones of the maze. For example, as the player characters proceed through this path, they could see the mural work appearing more decimated. The beauty of the previous halls is replaced by a vile sludge that clings to the walls. Some of the muck falls off in large chunks, revealing wall and floor sections stripped bare of any color and completely smoothed over. This area is being patrolled by blobs, specifically flesh-eating blobs. As the characters move forward, they will also have to find a way to avoid or disarm spike traps, pitfalls, oil slicks, and poison arrows. If they manage to survive all of that, the player characters will enter the center of the Mazerite court. They are greeted by an open floor of painted tiles. The walls are nearly spotless, with mosaics and creatures and peoples whose exploits are long lost to time. A set of stairs leads to an overlooking platform of 3 thrones. 3 figures sit upon the thrones, stone-carved lords reigning over a faltering maze. The place has much in common with a lordly court. It is here where the player characters can learn a bit more concerning the background of the maze itself. For example, the Minotaur, as I mentioned earlier, is quite dangerous. Maybe this beast has followed the player characters until this very zone, and perhaps the characters managed to kill the Minotaur. If they do, they will see an older looking man with a long graying beard that will appear from behind the thrones. He will look at them sternly and he will say that they were supposed to be another sacrifice, more meat to sate their guardian. That is obviously the Minotaur. But he congratulates the player characters for finally ending the cycle, although now they are all doomed. The player characters can ask several questions of this grey-bearded man. It turns out that he is Stone King Lodrin IV. He was the one who set up the trap on the roadway that swallowed the player characters into the maze. He says it's a necessary evil to further his plan. He gestures to the area around him. Lodrin will describe that they were a great city that lived beneath the world, venturing beyond only when they needed to and protected by the Minotaur. Infighting and a failure to control their guardian's lust for blood tore their society apart, the only remains being the people deep within, hiding from their former protector. Lodrin intended to search for a way to restore the place to its former glory and find some way to regain control of the Minotaur, but to no avail thus far. He could only extend his own lifespan through clever usage of his former subjects, and any attempts to rebuild or reclaim the halls from the Minotaur were met with failure. He has been deliberately avoiding the Mazerites that remain, as their fall from grace has left them tainted by desperation in a struggle to survive. So, if this king is asked what he intends to do, he states he will stay there and let the ghosts of the past die. He assumes his people have been killed or put beyond redemption by their cannibalism. Lodrin offers to allow the player characters to take what they wish from the Minotaur's boat and leave. The stone slab will shift, revealing the outside light. He suggests they leave, as there is nothing but death and decay left in this place. Now, an interesting thing is that if the player characters act respectful towards Lodrin, he will reward them, as stated earlier. But if they try to attack him, he is going to cause the entire collapse of all of the maze. So the characters could leave without nothing valuable in return. But there are other things that the player characters can do before reaching this area or before exiting the maze. They could stumble upon a cursed relic that raises a group of undead against them. They could also encounter prisoners within this place. However, these prisoners could be just as dangerous or even more than the true inhabitants of the Maze of Mezeria. Some of these prisoners are quite insane, they resorted to cannibalism, and they could be hiding their evil intentions quite skillfully as well. At the end of this document, you're going to find a complete summary of the entire maze. This is going to make it very easy for the game master to run the entire adventure. He or she would just need to take a quick glimpse or glance at the different points noted or listed in the summary to handle any off-rails situation, to run the encounters as explained in the rules, or make the necessary modifications according to the actions of the player characters. What if the player characters decided to travel with one of the prisoners? One or two or more of the prisoners? What if they decided to avoid the Minotaur and confront him in areas that you would normally not expect them to fight against this beast? What are their choices when they interact with the cannibals and the king of the maze himself? The summary provides useful information for all of these different events, unforeseen consequences. So what do I think of the Maze of Mezeria? This is a very interesting module that I think gives us some lessons on how to run a good maze without making it extremely long. Instead of making a mega dungeon, you create a well-designed maze filled with encounters that could even be considered classic encounters in fantasy, like the Minotaur, but here the Minotaur is given a greater purpose related to the protection of the former inhabitants of this maze that have now degenerated into cannibals. I also like it how the big mystery of the maze can be revealed in its totality with a single encounter. There are several clues throughout the maze, but you cannot exactly figure out things until you talk with one who has witnessed the tragedy. So I recommend that you get this Maze of Mezeria. It also contains greater value because of the backgrounds for the Worlds Without Number role-playing game. If you love backgrounds, that is the pirate, the gravedigger, etc., I think you could even consider this a must-have. But when it comes to someone who is looking for a good adventure to run with his group, the Maze of Mezeria provides grittiness, a great challenge, and despite the gory details that you encounter throughout your journey, it never feels like an adventure completely focused on perhaps horror or dark fantasy. It feels brutal and gritty, but it handles a nice balance of themes. So despite the addition of cannibalism, I think this adventure fits in many campaign settings. It doesn't feel completely tied to a particular theme or mood. However, make no mistake that things within the maze will turn out to be quite savage. Well, thanks for watching my review, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.